Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. We are in Tel Aviv today and my guest is Ehud Olmert, former Israeli Prime Minister from 2006 to 2009. Hello and thank you for being with us.
I'm delighted.
Let's start, if you agree, with the Israeli political situation. It's a bit a nightmare for some time now. 3 elections in a row in less than a year, no clear majority for anyone, but President Rivlin asked Benny Gantz to form a government. Were you surprised by this?
No, I think it's very natural. The fact is that we didn't have to have 3 elections. The reason that we went into this painful process is because Netanyahu is in a personal problem. And he tried to tie up the political system in order to fit in with his personal interests, which have nothing to do with the government. He failed after the elections in April to form a government. He failed after the elections in September to form a government, and he now is unable to form a government. And actually the majority of the members of Knesset recommended to appoint Benny Gantz to form a government. So I think this was the most natural thing for President Rivlin to do, and he did it.
But the problem is Benny Gantz has a support from the jointists, mainly Arab Israelis on one side, and on the other side from far-right Israel Beitenu, who hate each other, let's be clear. So do you think we can have a new collapse of this weak coalition and have new elections in perhaps something like 1 year?
Well, number one, the fact is that in spite of the differences between the Arabs and Lieberman, they both recommended Benny Gantz, which in itself is a major breakthrough in Israeli politics. Now, I want to say something which is, I think, very important, very fundamental. The Arabs are part of the state of Israel. They are Israeli citizens. They have full rights. They had a great achievement in the last elections with 15 members in parliament, which is the highest they ever had. And I think that they should take part in and participate in the decision-making process in the country. So the fact that the Arabs are part of the group that recommends Benny Gantz is a great step forward, and I'm very happy about it. Now, how stable it will be remains to be seen. I think that first and foremost, Gantz has to form a government. If he will form a government, then many things, there will be a certain dynamic here. And some of the parties which are now associated with Netanyahu may reconsider, particularly the ultra-Orthodox parties. So there can be changes. Look, one thing is obvious. A prime minister that failed 3 times, consecutive times, in 1 year to have enough support to form a government is not capable of continuing, and he has to go home. The Likud at this point and Netanyahu at this point, they are interested not in how to deal with the national problems of Israel. That has to be clear. They are interested in one thing, how to protect Netanyahu and to make sure that he continues to be prime minister at almost any cost.
When you were prime minister, you were accused of corruption also, but you resigned. Then you have been sentenced, you spent some time in jail, 16 months. Now you are talking about him. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, is, yes, accused in the press, as you when you were in office, but he's more than that, he's indicted. His trial will start in May, and he still refuses to leave power. Is this something acceptable in a democratic country?
Well, number one, I have to say that when I was prime minister, I was never accused, nor was I investigated, nor was I ever indicted on anything which has to do with the prime ministership. Everything that was collected against me by my political rivals, and this was part of the conspiracy which was operated and financed by Netanyahu and his Jewish American friends that gave a lot of money for this, was about many years before I became prime minister. Everything that Netanyahu is indicted for is involved with his being prime minister, that he violated the authorities of prime minister in order to benefit himself and to benefit his friends for his own personal interests. This is a fundamental difference. Now, I decided to resign at a very early stage because I felt that it will not be appropriate for a prime minister to get into a direct confrontation with the law enforcement agencies of the country. I was absolutely clear and clean, and I know that unfortunately there was a dramatic and maybe tragic mistake committed in my case by the courts, but no one is above the law. I suffered from this, but I bowed my head and I said, the courts are above me. Netanyahu thinks that he is not only above the courts, but that he is above the country, and this will not work.
Have you ever thought about coming back in politics?
There are many people that think that I should go back into politics, but I think that at the present turmoil, I think I still have a time to think about it. It's too early.
Let's talk about something else now. What do you think about the Trump peace plan, or so-called peace plan? Is it as horrible as Palestinians say? Is it as fantastic as Benjamin Netanyahu says?
First of all, I have to say, I don't think that Netanyahu thinks that this is a fantastic plan. If he thought that this is a fantastic plan, he would have said, I'm in favor of a Palestinian state, because, as you know, the Trump plan talks about two states. A Palestinian state, of course, the state of Israel. Netanyahu is in favor of 30% of the Trump plan, but not of all of it. He is in favor of the unilateral annexation of territories of the Jordan Valley and the settlements, but he is against the most fundamental principle of the Trump plan, which is a two-state solution. Now, I met with Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president in America, a few weeks ago, and I advised him, I said to him, Mr. President, I can understand why you are unhappy with certain parts of the Trump plan, but let's look at it from the positive side, not from the negative side. From the positive side, the Trump plan talks about two states. Why wouldn't you challenge Netanyahu and say that you are prepared to negotiate on the basis of the Trump plan in as long as the two-state solution is a basic principle of this plan? And let's see what happens. I think that the Trump plan is not ideal. And I think the president himself said that this is a basis of negotiations.
What about settlements in the West Bank? For the first time in history, the US recently said, for them now, they think they are legal. International law doesn't say that. You, among other Israelis, you think there should be a Palestinian state, a peaceful one, of course. But how could a Palestinian state exist with so many settlements and no clear territorial continuity?
I think that there should be a Palestinian state with territorial continuity. The question is, how can we separate from the Palestinians? The key, the basis for peace settlement with the Palestinians is a separation between us and the Palestinians.
How can we do that with the settlements?
Without. We'll have to pull out most of the settlements. There will be 3 demographic centers in the West Bank that will remain under Israeli sovereignty, and Israel will swap territories, same size, so that the borders between the state of Israel and the Palestinian state will depend on the 67 lines. Not identical, but same size. And so we will have to remove many of the settlements in order to allow the Palestinian state to have territorial continuity and integrity. It's in the interest of the state of Israel so that there will be a clear separation, because Israel has to be a Jewish state, the Palestinian has to be a Palestinian state, and this is the only way to achieve it. So when I say that we are in favor of removing most of the settlements, I don't say it because I want to help the Palestinians. I want to help the state of Israel, and this is the only way to help the state of Israel maintain its identity.
We really often hear on the Israeli side that there is no partner for peace on the Palestinian side. You did negotiate with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. So please tell us, is he a good partner for peace?
Number one, I think that Dr. Mahmoud Abbas is a decent man, He's not a member of the Likud party in Israel, that's for sure. He's not even a Zionist, that's also for sure. He's a Palestinian. Would you expect him to represent the positions of the most extreme right-wing parties in Israel? Never. He represents his own people. And we have different opinions. But he is against terror, and he is in favor of having peace with Israel. I offered him the best possible peace plan that was ever offered by an Israeli prime minister. As he said once, and he showed it on television, we were that close to conclude a deal. And that's why there was such a conspiracy to put me out, because all the forces that were against an Israeli withdrawal from many of the territories wanted me to go out and not to continue to be prime minister. But the fact is that I proposed this plan, and Abu Mazen at that time didn't say yes. He never said no, but he never said yes. This was his mistake. In the last 10 years, the government of Israel under Netanyahu never committed itself to accomplish an agreement on the basis of two states. The interest of the state of Israel is to have peace with the Palestinians. In order to have peace with the Palestinians, we have to agree to have a Palestinian state, which will require a major step by the state of Israel, which will not be easy, which will be difficult. But you are in leadership position in order to take difficult positions, and not in order to refrain from it and only to look for popularity.
So everybody knows you were prime minister, but before that, you have been mayor of Jerusalem for 10 years.
Correct.
And you said Jerusalem should be divided, should be the capital of Israel for West Jerusalem and capital of a future Palestinian state for East Jerusalem. This is not something we hear very often now in Israel.
Look, one has to say the truth, and it's about time that we'll spell out the truth as it is, not according to these shallow slogans which have been used, by the way, by myself many years ago also. I don't relieve myself of my responsibility in the past for unnecessary rhetoric. But let's face it, Abu Dis is not Jerusalem, Beit Hanina is not Jerusalem, Jabal Mukaber is not Jerusalem, the refugee camp in Shuafat is not Jerusalem. All these are parts that were annexed in 1967 to Israel, but which are unnecessary and unimportant and are not part of Jerusalem. The only thing which is of significance is the Holy Basin, the old city of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount of Jerusalem, and so on. Now, I believe that no one can claim exclusive sovereignty over the Holy Basin. The Arab part of the city of Jerusalem will be the capital of the Palestinians. The sovereignty over the Holy Basin in Jerusalem will be by God.
I would like to talk about the Jordan Valley. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu promised to annex it. He wants to do it as soon as possible. This is not only a matter of security, and you proposed some alternatives 12 years ago. Perhaps you want to say a word about it. But this is also something like, this is our land, this is Israeli land. How do you feel about that? Do you think the Jordan Valley in the West Bank is Israeli land and should be annexed?
There is a way to resolve the security issue without the need to annex the Jordan Valley. So the question is very simple. When someone says that he is prepared to make peace, he needs to make concessions. So, of course, historically for the Jewish people, all of the West Bank is part of the memories and the prayers and the legacy and the tradition that Jews always believed in. But to make peace now is more important. So we have to balance it. We can't have everything that we want. We can't have everything that we believe we possess. We have to make some concessions. And Israel is strong enough, is powerful enough to defend itself even under these circumstances of pulling out from most of the West Bank, as I have proposed. So this is the way to do it. And it requires leadership, it requires strength, and what's more important, it requires that the ones who take decision will think about the future of the people and not the personal future.
A word about Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu talks about Iran all the time. Iran wants to destroy Israel. Iran will have a nuclear bomb very, very soon. We hear that for years and years now. You have been in power. What is true, what is false? Is Iran a real, imminent, existential threat for the state of Israel?
Well, first of all, I should remind you, which is important, not insignificant, there was a nuclear threat on the state of Israel in Syria. There was an atomic reactor in Syria. I ordered the destruction of this atomic reactor and we destroyed it. It wasn't easy. It was a very, very difficult and complex decision to take at a time, 12 years ago. But I did it without talking. Netanyahu talks all the time, does nothing. Now, Iran is a problem. But life is not a rose garden. Life is filled with problems, and Iran is one of those problems, and we have to deal with Iran. I dealt with Iran many years, and I think that we can handle the threat of Iran. It is not an existential threat to the state of Israel. It's a problem. And I think that sometimes the rhetoric that Netanyahu uses in order to describe the danger from Iran is blown out of its real proportions.
Thank you very much, Ehud Olmert, for answering our questions on France 24. Thank you to Matthias Somm and Cécile Galluccio behind the cameras. And thank you for watching this interview. Have a very nice day.
Thank you very much.